ladies and gentlemen, I'm Krishna C. Nadella, and this is State of Mind. Today's topic is about pressure, how to bend but not break. It is said that college is the best time of a young adult's life. Although that may be true in hindsight, for many it can also be the most stressful. The demands placed on today's students require them to continually find ways to differentiate themselves from their peers, while at the same time they are pushed to their limits both mentally and physically, and still expected to come out as well-adjusted individuals. In the race for academic and professional success, it begs the question that students across the country are faced to ask: how do I avoid burning out? With us here today to help better understand the various perspectives on the topic is Dr. Arya Soman. Dr. Soman is a board-certified psychiatrist working in the Northwell Health system. She's also the Director of Medical Student Education and an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the Hofstra Northwell School of Medicine. Dr. Soman earned her BA from Harvard College and her MD from the Stony Brook University School of Medicine. Arya, thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be here, Krishna.
So let's take a step back and talk about the academic environment as a whole. Why is it such a pressure cooker of stress for students when they come into these environments? They were doing very well in high school. What's the difference in college?
Well, that's a great question. I think one of the terms that you used really speaks to that. You said that, it can be a pressure cooker.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is that, basically when you get to college, it can be a very natural boiling point because, again, especially if, you were a student who was doing quite well in high school, all of a sudden, you're in a very large pool of people who also did quite well and, did the same kinds of things oftentimes or things that maybe you never experienced in order to also earn their places, in that class. And so oftentimes there can be a lot of pressure in terms of just nervousness about, what are you going to be like? Where are you going to be on that bell curve now when you're in this much larger environment?
Right.
And then the fact of the matter is that, as exciting as going to college can be, even positive changes can be stressful.
Really?
Absolutely, because the thing is that even though, it's something you're looking forward to, it's also completely new. So, there are expectations in terms of what you want to get out of college. There might be expectations from your friends, your family.
Right.
That can be huge. And then, there are expectations in terms of what are the requirements that you need to meet? What are the deadlines that you have to meet?
Right.
And then trying to figure out, right, there's a whole new range of choices in terms of what do you want to do? What kinds of activities do you want to do? Who do you want to spend time with? So, it's a lot of new factors and a lot of uncertainty. And at the same time, that there are all of these new things, there's also at times, especially if you're going to college out of state, there can also be then the absence of the familiar, right? Because, you're not at home anymore, especially if you're living on campus in another state, you're in a new place, you have, you can reach your friends, but oftentimes, all those folks that you grew up with, you're not with them every day anymore, you're not with your family anymore, so, I think it's a combination of those factors.
So when we talk about pressure, I always think of two types. The pressure I put on myself and the pressure I feel from the external factors. Help us understand the bifurcation of those two concepts.
Absolutely. So external pressures, again, are things that are happening to you, right? They can be events like going to college, taking new classes. They can be new experiences. They can be, again, all of those external expectations that I mentioned. But then also unanticipated events or, illnesses. Like there can just be all sorts of life events.
Right.
Exactly. And so then internal pressures come more from, again, sort of those internal expectations you have for yourself. And, you often hear the phrase that you can be your own worst critic, right? So there's always that internal sense of how am I doing? Could I do better? I should do better. Kind of beating yourself up. And then there's also, the emotions that come with that in terms of anger, in terms of fear. Uncertainty is huge. And again, like I said before, with college, there's so many new experiences and new choices. And again, new demands, right, on an academic and social level. And so the thing is, it can also be a matter of a feeling of loss of control.
Got it. So with pressure comes stress. And stress, they say, generally involves too many demands on you physically and psychologically. So what are some of the ways that students can identify when they're in a stressful environment? How can they have the self-awareness to realize it and then potentially do something about it?
Right. It's a very important question. And it's an important skill for students to be able to develop. I think first of all, one of the things that's important to note is that stress can actually, in small degrees, can be helpful, or stress or anxiety can sometimes be a positive thing.
Okay, you're going to have to help me understand this, because I've never thought of stress in that capacity.
That's why I figured I'd start there, because the thing is that, stress or anxiety can be normal parts of the human range of emotions and of experiences. And the thing is,
So I apologize. Is stress an emotion?
Well, stress can link to emotions. That's a great question. Stress is a combination, right, of emotions and physical reactions. And so the thing is that, with a little bit of stress, or in terms of emotions, anxiety, sometimes that can be quite helpful, because it can make us feel exhilarated. It can make us feel like we want to rise to that challenge. It can make us feel motivated to really, again, push our boundaries and really sort of try new things. So in that sense, it can be helpful. And, oftentimes when I talk to people about anxiety or about stress, I also mention the fact that, we evolved to sometimes experience anxiety and experience that fight or flight reaction, because it can also keep us safe.
True.
So it can be helpful to an extent. But like you said, when you asked me the question, it's a matter of if it's too much. Right? So the thing is that if there's too much stress, then that's a problem. And in terms of how do people recognize it, right? Again, there are a couple different domains as far as physically, emotionally, what are some common signs? And so on a physical basis, a lot of times when people are under a lot of stress, you often end up feeling literally physically tense, a lot of sort of upper shoulder, neck tension. A lot of times people might have frequent headaches. All of a sudden,
hypertension?
They can have high blood pressure, absolutely. So it's affecting you both in ways that you literally feel and that show up when you go for your annual physical and things like that. So yeah, you can have high blood pressure, your heart's racing, so it can really affect you that way. And then that translates into having trouble sleeping, either falling asleep, or all of a sudden you're waking up in the middle of the night. So those are really common, signs on a physical basis of being under stress. And on an emotional basis, in addition to sort of the common idea of, oh my gosh, I feel so stressed out, that's coming from a place of I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling angry, or all of a sudden things that normally don't irritate me, I'm blowing up, or I'm getting overwhelmed at the smallest things. So noticing those differences, either for yourself or because your friends around you are saying, hey, what's going on? Those are some pretty good signals that something's going on.
So as someone who's associated with a medical school, an academic institution, what are some of the resources that academic institutions can provide to help alleviate stressful situations, whether it be in the classroom and then also outside the classroom in the form of health centers?
So things that a lot of colleges and a lot of graduate schools can do, first of all, it starts with education, right? It starts with letting people know, what is stress? What are common signs of stress? Making it an open conversation and letting people know it's okay to feel stressed out. It's not a failing.
Is there a stigma that comes with being stressed?
Yeah, absolutely. That's precisely why I was just saying that, because oftentimes, again, whether it's from external images or expectations or those internal thoughts, a lot of times people feel like, if I admit that I'm stressed out, maybe, that means I can't cut it the way that my students can. Exactly. It's a sign of weakness, and that's not acceptable. So, there's either the stigma that comes from your own beliefs, or again, this fear that others are going to think you're weak, even if you know that that's not the case.
Understood.
So that's why, talking about it and making people aware that this is not something, to be ashamed of, or, to hold back about, is the first step, educating people about what are the signs. And then in terms of on, an academic basis or, a health basis, as far as resources, first of all, in terms of academic things, letting people know what are the local, writing centers, study centers, tutoring options that are available. And then also in terms of, mental health counseling centers, what are the resources? Some places will have hotlines or student peer support groups, things like that. So just basically letting people know what's available.
Okay. Now, of course, that's in a perfect world where you have the self-awareness to see the signs and then do something about it.
Right.
In the college environment, it's not surprised that in many cases the abuse of stimulants is a path that some students go down to deal with pressure and deal with stress specifically. Talk to me about that, and more importantly, why that's as prevalent as it is today, especially with prescription medication.
No, absolutely. And it is, you're right, it is a big problem. The fact of the matter is, again, a lot of times people feel like they need to keep pushing themselves. They need to keep taking on, whatever extra aids are going to help them get through without having to admit to someone else that they're having a hard time. And so oftentimes it can start with, again, just things that we think of very commonly as part of the college culture in terms of, all right, I'm gonna push myself. I'm not gonna sleep. I'm gonna start, chugging those energy drinks. I'm gonna start, drinking a lot of soda, drinking a lot of coffee because I need to stay up. And if I have more caffeine in my system, I can focus more. I can do more. But then all of a sudden, more and more people find that, okay, that's not enough. I feel like I can't concentrate when you're not sleeping as well. That's a lot harder. And all of a sudden people feel like there's not enough time to get things done. I should probably take something else to help me be even more efficient, to focus more. And that's often the most common reason when people present to counseling centers as far as saying that they are either borrowing people's stimulants, buying stimulants, or they're seeking stimulant prescriptions. The most common reason is because I need to study more and I need to study better. So the issue is that when people first start taking stimulants, if they're taking a low dose, they borrow something from their friend. A lot of times you'll hear people say, that actually worked out pretty well. It helped me. I got stuff done. And so, I don't see why I shouldn't keep doing it. And so all of a sudden, though, they find that they take more and more.
I see the A word coming up, addiction.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the path that this goes down, and again, it's a very slippery slope, and people often then don't realize it until it's too late, and they find that it's no longer about getting the work done, it's about when can I get the next dose, because otherwise I don't feel good. And a lot of times the danger of that with addiction and abuse of these kinds of medications or again, energy drinks, is that people don't realize that there are a lot of side effects. There's a reason it's a controlled substance. There's a reason, it's a prescribed medication. And the thing is that, common side effects of stimulants include, again, difficulty sleeping, difficulty eating. And again, not sleeping and not eating are going to have major impacts on, both from an efficiency standpoint, which is what, drives them to take it. It's going to mess with your concentration. It's going to mess with your ability to stay focused, retain information. And then again, on a much more important basis, it's really going to mess with your general health. I mean, it's a long-term solution. It's not a long-term solution. So that's a big problem. And sometimes with stimulants, people can even experience feelings like their mind's playing tricks on them. They can become psychotic. So
I want to hold that thought because we are going to do a separate episode on substance abuse. But taking the concept of stress one step further. So I'm not the doctor, you are, so I'll be reading verbatim. Unlike stress, burnout is characterized by disengagement, not overengagement. That is, by feeling empty, devoid of motivation, and beyond caring, and not seeing any hope in of positive change in one's situation. We don't talk about burnout a lot in the college environment, but I have to feel it's a prelude to dropping out, is it not?
Absolutely, and that's one of the dangers, and one of the reasons it's so important to identify signs of burnout, because like you said, I mean, as far as those feelings of disengagement, if you're not motivated, if you don't want to go to class anymore, if you don't want to do the assignment because you feel like, what's the point? That's not really going to be a recipe for being able to succeed and continuing in what you're doing. So oftentimes burnout can lead to either completely switching majors while people are still in school, and while on the surface that might not seem like that big a problem, at the same time it could be a major missed opportunity for someone who might have otherwise really loved and excelled in that original major. And then, when it extends on a more general basis in the academic world, then absolutely that can be a prelude to dropout.
Right. And I have to get the sense, you never hear a lot of stories about burnout. You always hear stories about stress.
Right.
Is it a lot more silent and subtle in terms of how it happens? Like you said, someone switches a major, maybe they stop going to class, but you're not going to see someone really speaking out or showing the signs, or are there signs of burnout that you can tell physically and emotionally when you speak with someone?
Well, I think that you've really identified and captured part of the issues in terms of burnout versus that more sort of active stress. And that is sometimes what can happen in terms of people kind of flying under the radar and sort of slipping away quietly. But in terms of, are there ways to recognize it? Absolutely, especially if there is a student who, like from the teacher's perspective or from their peers, which is, again, one of the most important sources of noticing those early signs. All of a sudden, someone who was really always engaged, always interested, passionate, whether it's about the class, study groups, whether it was about, again, just other activities too, related to, the academics. If you start noticing a change, right, it's that change in frequency, it's that sudden increase in absences, sudden late assignments or asking for extensions, those are signs to maybe check in and say, hey, what's going on?
So I can't help but notice that a lot of those symptoms you mentioned aren't just necessarily tied to the academic setting. They happen in the professional world as well.
Absolutely.
A lot of people say that the college environment is a preparatory area to get ready for the real world. So talk to me about the parallels of not being able to properly address stress and burnout, and how that can affect into your much longer professional and real life.
Right. Just as you said, college is preparation for the rest of your life. And what's happening in college, it's not just a matter of just getting through so you can get to the next step. If you're feeling that way in college, then the odds are, it's gonna really happen if you're engaging in the same patterns, right? That led to burnout in college. If that starts being something you experience in work, the same things can happen where all of a sudden your performance reviews aren't looking so great. All of a sudden, you wanna be a star, you wanna stand out, you wanna get that promotion. But it's not happening because, all of a sudden you're just not as engaged. You're not doing the things that you need to do. So it can have very real world impacts on overall long-term job performance. Job satisfaction is, you need to be satisfied and you need to be content with what you're doing, because otherwise it's not going to happen in terms of all of the success that people are reaching for and striving for. Not only are you not going to be able to experience those things or achieve those things, but you're in very real danger of, again, sort of losing that job, and either because your boss sees something's going on, or because, again, you get so disengaged and so burned out that it can lead to things like depression and just wanting to completely switch careers.
Got it. So let's take all this theoretical that we've talked about. You're over half a decade out of medical school. Talk to me about the stresses that you've experienced going through undergrad at Harvard, medical school, your residency, and now an attending doctor. Talk to me about your own personal experiences.
Absolutely. Yes, I definitely have quite a lot of experiences. When I finished my training, I realized, my goodness, I have been in school since high school. Starting with college, it's been 14 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, that's quite a long time. So, looking back, I definitely needed to develop the skill set to handle pressure and to succeed. And I think that looking back to when it all started, when I started college, I remember there sort of, as far as big picture concepts and then practical concepts, there were a couple of things that helped me. On a big picture level, when I started and I was about to, start orientation week, I was absolutely very nervous. Again, I was used to doing well, and all of a sudden, I was really nervous about, can I cut it in, this class that potentially has who knows how many geniuses, attending and things like that. And so I remember one thing that folks said to me and said to my classmates on orientation, where they let us know, again, that you're probably all feeling that way. Again, they made it very sort of open. They laid
Sure.
it down on the table, and they were saying you have to remember each and every one of you may have a different skill set, may have a different background, but each and every one of you earned your place here. And that's what's important to remember. It's
You
not
belong.
about exactly. It's not about what the person next to you did. It's about believing in yourself.
Right.
And as cheesy as that sounds, it's such it really makes such a big difference.
Right.
And that's true whatever school you're in, whatever setting you're in. You did something to, make people recognize you, and you earned your spot there.
Right.
So it's not, college isn't another series of hoops to jump through.
Sure.
It's like you said, it's an opportunity, it's preparation for the rest of your life, who you want to be, what you want to do.
Right.
So that reframe in terms of how you view the experience
Sure.
goes a long way.
Got it.
And then on the practical standpoint, did I have moments of procrastinating, of trying to pull an all-nighter to get a
Right.
paper done? Absolutely. But I recognized very quickly that, that's not sustainable.
Right.
Again, if you're in it for the long haul, you've got to pace yourself. You've got to really work on getting the right amount of sleep,
Right.
getting getting the right amount of food.
Taking care of your health.
Taking care of, exactly, your physical and emotional health.
Right.
And the thing is that, again, this might sound cheesy, but as far as a lot of times people might feel like, it's a waste of time. I need to study. Like, it's a waste of my time to take that break or to go to sleep and
Right.
things like that. But the fact of the matter is, you're doing all these things on an academic basis because you're investing in your future.
Got it.
So, taking a break, taking care of yourself, doing other things that you love, like, that's an investment in
Right.
you.
Well, I can tell you that as a working professional, I'm still working on that. So I think that's great advice. And to the point that you can leave a parting thought to our audience, I always think about the social, the emotional, the physical, and mental. What type of advice that should we consider as we're entering college, or even those of us in the professional setting, in terms of dealing with stress? You obviously mentioned take care of your health. Any other parting thoughts?
Absolutely. Yeah, so take care of your physical health, your emotional health. Think about those signs of stress, of burnout that I mentioned, and reach out sooner rather than later in terms of reaching out to your friends, your teachers, your local resources as far as counseling centers. And on an academic standpoint, again, if you're having a hard time,
Right.
like procrastinating or things like that, touch base with friends or teachers in terms of, seeing if maybe they can help you on a practical basis. Like, maybe you have to get a rough draft in sooner, things like that, to help keep you on track, basically.
Right. Leverage your resources.
Exactly. And then finally, again, on a another emotional and spiritual standpoint, like, again, if there are sort of other things that help keep you going and help keep you happy, whether, again, it's specific hobbies, or if you're someone who's spiritual, or, faith is an important part of your life, stay connected to those things.
Got it. Well, Arya, thank you so much for your perspectives. I think this has been very helpful for our audience.
Thank you.
On that note, that'll wrap up our show for today. If you like what you saw in today's episode, please like, comment, share, and subscribe on the following social media platforms at the bottom of your screen. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and remember, every life is a book. Make yours a bestseller. Have a good night.